This lesson is taken straight from the Mouth Posture Phase 1 lesson that helps you build the mouth posture of American English so that you can sound like a native. The breath is a super important part. There are many exercises in this lesson that are going to help you, especially the breath in 4 levels. I hope you enjoy. Please practice the exercises and make sure that you watch the main lesson later. And the reason why this is important, and we have to talk about this first, is because the breath is part of the sound. Even if everything else is perfect, let's say I do but I don't have enough breath, or it's too controlled. Number one, it's harder to understand, to hear clearly. Number two, it's like, is that the right sound? It almost sounds like maybe it's not the right sound, but I know it's the right sound because I know how to make it. I'm just not using enough breath. There are 2 parts to the breath in a language. The first part is control, meaning, how tight, how closed you are, how open you are to let that air come out of the throat. But number 2, which is also very important and a little more difficult to get, is the force of breath. If I try to just open a little bit so you can hear this nice and easily, and you can practice with this. Let's say I take a deep breath, I hold it, I start closed, and then let's say I just try to use a little bit of force. I just try to push a little bit. Basically, I'm just kind of letting it come out. So I go, say I can continue doing that for a while because number 1, I'm only letting a little air through, and number 2, I'm not pushing much, so the air is going to slowly leave my lungs, very, very slowly. Now, I could be completely open and not push out much, and that would be like, I didn't let it all fall out, I just kind of didn't have a lot of force there. Now, on the opposite end, let's say I'm open a lot, and I really try to push the air out really strongly. So it's a different effect. Now, if we go back to the closed position, so I just open a little bit, but I try to push out really strong. Now, it was a lot shorter, the breath left faster, even though I still had that tighter control. So there's the control for how much the breath is coming through, but then there's also the force that also affects how fast that breath gets pushed through that opening. It's probably one of the biggest breath exercises that is going to help you, the breath in 4 levels. Now, at first, this might seem kind of weird, but trust me, there's a purpose for each level. The first level you're going to do is basically a strong whisper, very strong, forceful breath, no voice. You're going to just pick a random sentence. It doesn't matter. Let's just use, I want to go to the beach, because that's what we usually do. And you just say that very strongly. I want to go to the beach. I want to go to the beach. So you can hear, it's like I'm whispering, but I'm trying to push it out with more force. But one big trap here is you might think you're pushing out enough, and you're probably not. So if you're doing like, I want to go to the beach, it's not enough. I want to hear more. I want to, right? Think of breathing. I want to go to the beach. That's what you want to do. Try to make it as strong as you can. Another trap is that maybe you're pushing more, but you're too tight, you're too controlled. Okay, this goes back to that throat control. So maybe you say like, I want to go to the beach. Okay, that force is there, but it feels very tight. So you got to open up a little more. So this separates the breath from the voice, and it also helps you try to push farther than you think you have to, because a common mistake is that you don't go far enough. And it just gives you a better idea of, okay, this is what strong breath would be. Then the next level, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to add voice. So we want to hear a lot of that air mixed in. This is normally not what you want in American English, but there's a purpose for this level, don't worry. So instead of, I want to go to the beach, Add a little voice. I want to go to the beach. I want to go to the beach. I want to go to the beach. This helps you start to bring in the voice, and then you start to figure out how to balance the two, which might seem very obvious and simple, but that actually is a problem for a lot of people. And it makes a lot more sense when you're trying to work on the breath to remove the voice from the equation first, get that breath going, and then start adding that voice back in. It makes the process a lot simpler. And then you're trying to find that balance to intentionally make it breathy, because if you can intentionally make it breathy, where it just sounds like there's voice but there's too much breath, then you can better intentionally not make it breathy and control that level of breath better. You see what we're getting at? Okay, the next level is just a normal whisper. So we don't want to be too strong, we don't want to be too weak, but this is not a normal whisper in your language, because if your language uses less breath or it uses more control so that breath doesn't come out as much, your whisper is going to be a little bit lower, a little bit smaller. We want a normal American English whisper where there's nice good flow, there's a constant flow of breath. So you don't want to say, I want to go to the beach. No, you want to kind of fall forward into the next word, into the next sound. Let that breath keep going. I want to go to the beach. I want to go to the beach. See, it doesn't stop. I want to go to the beach. And it's not just about not creating pauses. It's about keeping the airflow consistent. Because one problem you might have is maybe you kind of start pushing out some breath and then it goes back to where it was before because you're not used to it. Okay? So you don't want to say, I want to go to the beach. Or, I want to go to the beach. Okay? You need to be able to control a consistent level of basic airflow to make a nice, good flowing whisper. The last step, we're going to add that voice back in again, but because we don't have extra breath, it's just going to be normal American English speech with the proper level of breath. I want to go to the beach. Okay, this is probably going to be the trickiest one. I want to go to the beach. As I talked about probably before, it's a little harder to hear that breath now. I want to go to the beach. Right? That's all breath because there's no voice, but that breath is still underneath the voice. Okay, and it's helping us fall forward through the sentence. I want to go to the beach. Not, I want to go to the beach. That's good for practicing that other level. That's not what we want normally, and that's not what we want for this level. Also, you don't want to do, I want to go to the beach. Try to get enough air, consistent flow, not too constricted. Now, the other techniques we're going to talk about are going to help you do that even better, but this is sort of the big main breath technique that you're going to want to keep practicing. I recommend that you do this at least 5 to 10 minutes every day, random sentences, change it up every day. This is its own little routine. Now, one other thing that can really help, especially if you're having trouble maybe with your throat being a little too tight or a little too closed, you're still having trouble getting that breath to flow really well. Remember in phase 0, we talked about that technique where you take a breath, you hold it, it's closed, you open it a little, close it again, open it a little, close it again. And we're focused on kind of feeling the throat, just getting a little bit of basic breath going to get familiar with it. You can take that technique and change it a little bit, and this will help you smooth things out and get a better transition from fully closed to fully open. You can also go backwards if you want. For example, see, it's nice and smooth. What I did not do is see how it's sort of like close, open, closes. It doesn't, I'm generally opening, but I'm kind of like, I don't have this consistent, smooth transition. If you have that control, it's going to be easier to do things here. But for the force part, there's a hack. This is the projection hack. So if you're on a stage right, and you're giving a speech, what do? Well, you tend to push out your voice more so that you can be heard. There's more breath, there's more volume. You tend to enunciate more. Now, what you want to do, we don't want to enunciate more. This is just the breath. Don't increase your volume. You're going to go to your native language. Go ahead and say the sentence, I want to go to the beach, in your language. Just first say it normally. Okay, your jaw is normal, your tongue is normal, your breath is normal. Just say the sentence how you normally would. And please go ahead and do this. Okay, say it a couple times, just kind of feel. Okay, now what I want you to do is go ahead and say that sentence again in your native language. You're going to keep everything the same, except you're going to project your breath a little bit. Don't increase the volume, don't enunciate more clearly. Just use a little more breath that you would use if you were projecting, and say that sentence exactly the same as you did in your native language. Go ahead and do it a few times. Now what you should notice is there's a little bit more breath coming through. And again, this isn't the same for every single language. So if your language isn't more closed off here, you're going to want to play with it and see. You might not even have to change anything here. But if your native language is more closed, usually you're not going to have enough breath. So your native language breath, in normal speech is probably about here, for example. Okay? Let's say this is 0, you're like right here. Okay. Then when you project your breath, you probably bump up to maybe about here. Okay. Now this would more or less be normal American English level of breath. Then when we project, we might push our breath up here. Might sound a little unnatural in your language. That's okay. We don't care about your language right now. That will get you probably pretty close to what you want to do in normal speech for American English. And then you can practice that. Now you have a reference and an anchor based on your language to try to adjust into just that little extra force of breath that we need for American English. So I've given you some tools and exercises for the breath, and the test exercise or checkpoint so that you can kind of tell if you're doing better, if your breath is good enough, is do you sound clearer without being breathy and without raising your volume? So you want to play with the different exercises that we use, with the amount of force, with the amount of control, until you start sounding a lot clearer. That's your goal. Use the breath to sound clearer and let the sounds flow out on that breath. Your routine for the breath, you're going to spend 15 minutes practicing these extra breath exercises. And note that that 4-level exercise is its own little mini routine. So the work that you do for the exercises with the breath in your breath routine, that's in addition to the 4-level 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so that's going to add to your total breath work time. You can find the main lesson that this video comes from right here, or you can check out some other great content from English Hacks. Thank you guys so much for watching this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.